Of all the pizza styles in the US specifically, I really think I have to hand it to Detroit. I haven't been there yet, but I've had a few iterations of it outside of Detroit, and I really think I have to say that it's my favorite style. Something about the dense but also fluffy at the same time crust that crisps around the outside with that brick cheese, and the really thick heterogeneous sauce that gets laid over top. And I think the most important aspect of all this beauty comes from the type of pan that you use. People say you can get by with cake pans or just similar aluminum pans, but I really don't think it makes the cut. If you really want to make this style at home, I think you have to splurge and get one of these Lloyd Pans pizza pans. I'm using the 10 by 14 inch size here, and I'll link mine below. But let's get into how to make this, starting with the dough. This dough is typically around a 70% hydration, meaning that the weight of the water in the dough is about 70% of the weight of the flour. So into my stand mixer bowl, I'm going to start with 260 grams of warm water, into which I'll bloom 5 grams of active dry yeast.
Frothy boy.
Once that proves, I'll dump in 350 grams of bread flour. You're also going to dump in 9 grams of salt and start to mix this with the stand mixer, which I conveniently have no footage of because my stand mixer walked itself into my camera tripod and knocked it on the floor, and the lens is absolutely destroyed. Good thing I just bought this thing like 3 months ago. Anyway, the dough should be done kneading with the dough hook after about 8 minutes. Just make sure you can see some light through it before it tears. And now we're going to cover and rest this for like 30 minutes. This was really good timing because Brian Lagerstrom just released an updated Detroit pizza video like the day before I made this. So I'm going to follow some of his tips here, like uncovering after 30 minutes and performing a few strengthening folds. Just basically folding the dough over itself a few times until all the bottom dough is on top. Just helps a lot with the gluten formation and doesn't take a lot of work. So I'll cover for another 30 minutes and then repeat this 2 more times, after which you can move on to the next step of cooking, or you can rest this in the fridge overnight, which I'm going to do. So I just lather this in some olive oil and then cover it in plastic wrap so it can ferment one night. In my experience, it's worth it every time to rest your pizza dough for at least 1 day because the flavor is that much better. So on day 2, you can remove your dough and then grab the aforementioned Lloyd Pan's baking pan. Dump a couple of tablespoons of olive oil at the bottom and slather it around to get everything coated, and then dump your dough ball on top of it and carefully press it into the edges. The gluten strands are going to be tight from the fridge, so you're not going to be able to press them all the way to the edges at first. Just do your best without tearing the dough, and after a couple minutes of pressing, you can cover this and let it rest so the gluten can relax. After about 30 minutes, it should have relaxed a bit, and you should be able to press it a little bit further into the edges. But for best results, I would recommend covering this one more time for 30 minutes and letting it relax one more time. Then you can do one more stretch right before adding all your toppings, which we can get ready in the meantime while the dough is relaxing. But first, I'm going to load my pizza steel into my oven and then set it to its highest temperature, which is 550 Fahrenheit. That should take like a good hour to preheat. This pizza steel is also linked below. Now we can make our simple tomato sauce. You can use an immersion blender or regular blender to break this up, but I'm just going to use my food processor. I'll add one 28-ounce can of whole peeled San Marzano tomatoes, and then a couple of tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil, 2 big cloves of garlic which I've peeled, and I still don't understand how people can cut things towards their thumb, but I'm trying it here. Still can't do it, and I still don't see what benefit it serves. And then I'll add a small handful each of dried oregano, dried basil, and a little bit of red pepper flakes. Follow that up with a sprinkling of onion powder and then a spoonful of sugar, maybe a tablespoon. A good bit of salt, which we'll adjust later, and then you can process this until it's fine. We'll add this to a wide saucepan over medium heat and just stir it around to let it reduce for a while. This sauce doesn't spread over the whole pizza, it's just going to be put into some thick lines. So you're going to want to reduce this by quite a bit. I'd say like 2/3. Just stir constantly so nothing on the bottom burns, and when you can draw a really nice trail through it with your spatula, then you know you're good. I reduced mine for like 30 minutes for reference. And now arguably the most important element of this pizza is the type of cheese we use. You've probably heard that Wisconsin brick cheese is the traditional cheese to put on Detroit pizza. You've probably also heard that it's hard to get your hands on as well, especially if you're outside the Midwest. I bought mine on Amazon and I'll link it below, but I'll warn you it's not super cheap. I personally think this is vital. The taste of this is too distinct to skip, but if you want to use whole milk, low moisture mozzarella, then people say that's a good substitute. I'm going to chop this into cubes as opposed to shredding it. That's supposed to aid them in melting a little slower so they don't separate and release their fat too fast before the crust is finished. But in hindsight, I wish mine melted a little bit faster, so I might have cut these a little smaller next time. Either way, it's time to grab your dough and pull it to the edges one more time just to make sure it's touching. Be careful not to deflate it though. Start by sprinkling over your 340 grams of brick cheese. Try to spread this as evenly as possible, but really make sure to get that cheese around the edges because that's what melts and burns and creates those caramelized, crispy edges that we all want. Then carefully spoon over 3 stripes of the sauce. You could try to be more even than I was in this case. Oh well. You could stop there, and that would be a traditional Detroit pizza, but of course I'm gonna add some pepperonis. Wait, isn't pepperoni already plural? Not right now, dude, I really don't have time. So that would mean one of them is a pepperonis. Why do you literally never have anything productive to say?
I do too.
Oh, really?
Yes?
So how come my channel hasn't grown in 2 years?
Pepperonis?
And if it's possible, I would opt to buy a whole pepperoni log as opposed to the already sliced stuff. That way you can slice it thicker and it'll cup up better, which is really nice on a Detroit pizza. In the past, I've been able to find whole logs, but I can't anymore, so I would just use whatever the thickest sliced stuff you can find is. I put them in lines alternating with the sauce, just on top of the cheese. Make sure you bunch them up and put a lot of them because they do shrink. But that's my pizza. I'm gonna load it onto the preheated steel. Then it's just gonna sit there and cook for around 10 minutes. Just check periodically. You wanna make sure that the cheese is melted enough, but also the sides are crisping up nicely. The cheese can also overmelt and separate like we mentioned, and then the sides can also burn, so don't go too long. I'm gonna pull that out after around 10 minutes and let it sit for around 5 minutes. And then an extra step that a lot of home cooks use because our ovens aren't as powerful as the restaurant ones is to carefully remove the pizza from the pan, and then we're gonna load it back onto the steel to crisp it up even more. You can see the nice color that's already on the bottom of this crust, but we're gonna make it even better. So no more than 5 minutes on that hot steel will do the trick. You can see it's taken on a slightly darker color, which is gonna help the texture a lot. Okay, now your pizza's done. You can let it rest on a wire rack for just a couple of minutes until you can cut it into servable slices. Let's hear that crunch. Beautiful stuff. I'm already in heaven and I can't wait to get to the taste test. I think this came out so wonderfully. It browned really nicely on the outsides and on the bottom, while the insides stay really fluffy, and then that Wisconsin cheese on top. This is gonna be perfect. I already took long enough getting pictures and stuff, so I don't want it to get any colder. Cheers. Absolutely magnificent. This is everything I've enjoyed about the Detroit pizzas that I've had before, but I do think it's a little better being made at home. Maybe that would change if I go to Detroit and try the actual real stuff. But everything just punches you in the face. That cheese is a distinct flavor that you don't get with anything else. The sauce surprisingly stands out amongst everything else. It's super acidic and salty in a good way with that hint of sweetness. And of course you have these crispy edges created by that melted cheese. That's the best part. You can taste the sweetness of it, the caramelization of the cheese. That's heavenly. I'm gonna put a little bit of hot honey on it because that makes everything better. I've absolutely made bad pizzas before, or pizzas with bad elements like a bad crust, but this is probably the best one I've ever made at home of any type. It hits everything out of the park. This is amazing. I guess this is my favorite style of pizza. I think the two biggest secrets would unfortunately have to be the two things that you have to go out of your way to buy, and that's the Lloyd Pan's pizza pan as well as this Wisconsin brick cheese. I wouldn't say not to make this if you don't have those, but they really make this what it is. I try to be super honest in these videos, and I did come into this with high expectations, but I still think this blew my expectations. I was just expecting this to be something that tasted good and was a good meal to make at home, but this is incredible. Something truly, truly special. I hope you get the chance to try this yourself. This is a great thing to do if you love cooking at home. 100% won't be the last time I make this pizza at home. But that's gonna do it for me today. Thank you all for watching. Be blessed, and I'll see you next time. I think I have to say that was worth destroying my camera lens over.